In 2006, a CalArts student named James Garland Quintel submitted a short film to the Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted Animation Festival. The film was called 2 in the AM PM, and it was about two slackers working at a gas station who eat candy laced with drugs and start hallucinating. One of them transforms into a blue jay. The other turns into a gumball machine. And I need you to sit with that for a second, because that film, that weird, unhinged, clearly not for children student project, is the reason Regular Show exists. The blue jay became Mordecai, the gumball machine became Benson, and the guy who made it, J.G. Quintel, voiced both characters in that short with his college buddy Sam Marin. When Cartoon Network eventually picked up the show in 2010, Quintel insisted on keeping those exact same voices. He didn't want professional voice actors coming in and polishing out the rough edges. He wanted it to sound like two guys in a dorm room. And honestly, that decision is a huge part of why this show feels so different from everything else that was airing on Cartoon Network at the time. Tonight, we're going through all of it. Every obscure fact, every hidden detail, every behind-the-scenes story that most people have never heard about Regular Show. And I mean the real stuff, not the surface-level trivia you can find on any fan wiki in 30 seconds. I'm talking about the lost pilot that nobody has ever seen. The real-life restaurant that inspired the show's only Emmy-winning episode. The reason Skips skips instead of walks. The absolute insanity of how Season 8 ended up taking place entirely in outer space. The fact that a character on this show was secretly a Russian spy for 3 full seasons, and nobody noticed. All of it. So if you're watching this late at night, get comfortable, because we're going to be here for a while. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these for you. Just hit that button and we'll keep the deep dives coming. Alright, let's start with something that I think most people don't fully appreciate about this show, which is how unlikely it was that Regular Show ever got made in the first place. Because when you trace the origin story back, it's genuinely bizarre. Quintel didn't just wake up one day and pitch a show about a blue jay and a raccoon working at a park. This thing evolved over years from multiple student films that had absolutely nothing to do with parks or groundskeeping or any of the stuff the show actually became about. The first piece of the puzzle was The Naive Man from Lollyland, which Quintel made at CalArts and which aired as part of the Nicktoons Film Festival on August 24th, 2005. It's about an ambassador from a place called Lollyland who visits the United States for the first time and tries to pay for a meal with lollipops. That character, the Lollyland Man, became Pops. Same design, same innocent demeanor, same complete inability to understand how the real world works. Quintel took about 8 months to complete that short. And when you watch it, you can see Pops fully formed already. The round head, the high-pitched voice, the childlike wonder. Sam Marin did the voice for that short too, and it's basically identical to what he does on Regular Show. Then came 2 in the AM PM the following year. And here's what's wild about how that short came together. According to Quintel, the CalArts animation students had this tradition where about 20 of them would throw title names into a hat, draw them out, and read them aloud at midnight as a warm-up exercise. Then, they'd each rush back to their desks in a marathon effort to make a film in 48 hours based on the word they drew. That creative pressure cooker environment, that frantic energy of making something weird and personal with no filter, that's the DNA of Regular Show. You can feel it in every single episode. The show always had this quality of feeling like it was being made up as it went along, like the writers were having fun and not overthinking it. And that comes directly from how Quintel learned to create at CalArts. And here's the thing about Quintel's CalArts connections that I think gets underappreciated. He wasn't just making films in a vacuum. The CalArts animation program in the mid-2000s was essentially a laboratory for the next generation of animated television. Quintel was there. Pendleton Ward, who created Adventure Time, was there. They were classmates. They critiqued each other's work. They probably argued about cartoons at 3 in the morning over terrible cafeteria coffee. And both of them went on to create shows that fundamentally changed what Cartoon Network was capable of being. That's not a coincidence. That's an ecosystem. CalArts produced these 2 shows that became the twin pillars of what fans now call the Cartoon Network Renaissance. And the creative DNA of those late-night student film sessions is embedded in every single episode of both series. Adventure Time leaned into fantasy and emotional abstraction. Regular Show leaned into grounded absurdism and blue-collar comedy. They complemented each other perfectly, and I genuinely believe each show made the other better by existing alongside it. I actually went down a rabbit hole on this while putting this video together, and I found out something I'd never heard before. There was apparently a Flash animated version of the Regular Show pilot that exists as lost media. 2 short clips of this Flash pilot surfaced online at some point. One shows the intro, where Mordecai and Rigby are playing punchies for the clean spoon. The other is the segment where they're about to tie their game of rock, paper, scissors 100 times. But the complete Flash pilot has never been found or released publicly. Before one of the animators confirmed its existence, the only proof anyone had were those resurfaced clips. The hand-drawn version of the pilot is what ultimately sold the series to Cartoon Network, but somewhere out there, there's a Flash animated Regular Show that the world has never seen. And I don't know about you, but that kind of thing keeps me up at night. The pilot that did air, First Day, premiered alongside the first episode, The Power, on September 6th, 2010, at 8:15 p.m. on Cartoon Network's Monday Nights block. And right from that very first episode, Quintel established everything that would define the show for the next 7 years. Mordecai and Rigby find a magical keyboard that lets them do whatever they want. They use it irresponsibly. Things escalate to an absurd degree. Skips get sent to the moon. And through all of it, they're just trying to fix a hole in their bedroom wall that they made while wrestling with a doll named Beef Burrito. That escalation formula, mundane tasks spiraling into supernatural chaos, became the show's signature. But here's what I think most people miss about it. It's not random. The escalation is the metaphor. It's about how small choices snowball, how avoiding responsibility doesn't make problems go away. It makes them exponentially worse. Every time Mordecai and Rigby try to take a shortcut, the universe punishes them with cosmic-level consequences. That's not just comedy. That's a worldview. The Power premiered to 2.10 million viewers, which was strong for a new Cartoon Network show. And Quintel has said it's his favorite episode of the entire series. I think that makes sense. It's the purest expression of what the show is. No baggage, no relationship drama, no lore. Just 2 23-year-old friends being idiots and accidentally sending their coworker to the moon. And speaking of the age thing, here's a detail that I think gets overlooked. Mordecai and Rigby are confirmed to be 23 years old in the pilot. 23, not teenagers, not kids. They are grown adults who work full-time jobs and still act like they're in high school, and the show never pretends this is okay. Benson is constantly on the verge of firing them. Skips has to bail them out over and over. The other characters tolerate them, but there's always this underlying tension of, when are you two going to grow up? The entire show is about that question. And the fact that it takes 8 seasons and over 260 episodes for them to actually answer it, that's what makes the journey so satisfying. And while we're on the subject of the pilot, here's something that connects to a much bigger part of the show's DNA. The magical keyboard in The Power is basically a thesis statement for the entire series. Mordecai and Rigby find an object that gives them unlimited power, and the first thing they do is use it for something petty. They want a raise so they can fix their wall. Not world domination, not wealth beyond imagination, just enough money to patch some drywall. And that's the show. That's always been the show. These characters have access to extraordinary things, and they use them for the most mundane purposes imaginable. The comedy comes from the gap between what they could do and what they actually do. They could reshape reality, and they want to fix a hole in their bedroom. I think about that contrast every time I rewatch the pilot, and it never stops being funny. But The Power also establishes something darker. The keyboard isn't theirs. Rigby stole it from a wizard who was relieving himself in a bush. That's how the very first supernatural object enters the show. Through theft. Through taking something that doesn't belong to you. And the consequences of that choice escalate until Skips ends up on the moon. From the very first episode, Regular Show is saying, every shortcut has a price. Everything you take without earning will cost you more than you bargained for. And that's not just a plot device. That's a philosophy. I've rewatched the first season probably 4 times now while putting this video together, and something that always strikes me about those early episodes is how tight they are. Season 1 only had 12 episodes. 12. Most shows today get at least 20, but Quintel used those 12 episodes to establish every single character, every relationship dynamic, every tonal frequency the show would operate on. You've got Death Punchies, which is the 4th episode, where Rigby gets tired of losing at punchies and goes to a martial arts clinic to learn a move that'll let him finally beat Mordecai. There's a training montage set to Joe Esposito's "You're the Best Around," which is a direct reference to the Karate Kid. And that's not just a throwaway gag. Regular show uses 80s references as an emotional vocabulary. The synth music, the VHS tapes, the arcade games, the montage sequences, these aren't nostalgia bait. They're the show's way of expressing feeling. Quintel talked about this in an interview with LA Weekly, explaining that the 80s technology and pop culture weren't gimmicks. They're embedded into the regular show universe because those were the things that left a positive influence on him growing up. So when you hear an 80s rock song kick in during a pivotal moment, it's not the show being ironic. It's the show being sincere. It's Quintel saying, "This is what emotion sounds like to me." And I think that sincerity is a massive part of why the show resonated with so many people. In a media landscape drowning in irony and detachment, regular show just cared. It wore its heart on its sleeve and dared you to feel something. The season finale, Mordecai and the Rigbys, aired on November 22nd, 2010. It's about Mordecai and Rigby forming a fake band, accidentally entering a live performance even though neither of them can play an instrument, and then getting caught lip-syncing mid-show. The plot is basically the Milli Vanilli story translated into cartoon form. And look, on the surface, it's hilarious. But underneath, it's an episode about pretending to be something you're not, about taking shortcuts to avoid the hard work of actually learning a skill. And that's a theme the show would come back to over and over, especially with Rigby. Because here's the thing about Rigby that I think the show explores more honestly than any other cartoon I've seen. Rigby is a high school dropout. He never graduated. And for most of the show's run, that's treated as a punchline. Mordecai teases him about it. There's a whole episode in season 2 called More Smarter, which aired on June 13th, 2011, where Mordecai makes fun of Rigby for not having a diploma. So Rigby drinks a chemical that's supposed to make him smarter. He doesn't follow the instructions, obviously, and his brain gets overloaded. Mordecai does the same thing, and they have this escalating battle of intelligence that nearly destroys them both. It's funny, sure, but it's also deeply sad if you think about it. Rigby is so insecure about his lack of education that he'd rather drink an untested chemical than face the reality of what he's missed. And the show doesn't let him off the hook. It takes 7 full seasons, but Rigby eventually goes back to high school and earns his diploma. Rigby's Graduation Day special is the season 7 finale, airing on June 30th, 2016. It's a half-hour special, the only 3-part episode in the entire series, and it's genuinely emotional. Rigby has to give a speech at his graduation that'll be broadcast live on a show called Inspire America. His parents are there. Don, his brother, is there. Eileen is graduating from college on the same day. And there's this beautiful parallel of Rigby finally catching up to where everyone else in his life already is. He's not smart. He's not talented. He's not even particularly hardworking, but he finished something. He actually saw something through to the end. And for a character who spent 7 seasons taking every shortcut imaginable, that matters. But here's the twist that most people don't talk about. That graduation episode ends with the park literally going to space. The entire property lifts off the ground and launches into orbit, setting up season 8, which takes place entirely in outer space. So Rigby's big character moment, his graduation, his speech, all of it happens right as everything gets ripped away. He earns his diploma and immediately loses his home, his planet, his entire frame of reference. I don't think that's an accident. I think Quintel is saying something about how growing up doesn't come with a reward. You don't get to graduate and then relax. You graduate and then the real challenges start. That's the most regular show thing imaginable. You achieve something meaningful, and the universe immediately escalates the stakes. Let me talk about Benson for a minute, because I think he might be the most underrated character in the entire show. On the surface, he's the angry boss. He yells. He threatens to fire people. He turns red, literally, because he's a gumball machine. But when you dig into his backstory, Benson is one of the most tragic characters in animated television, and I'm not exaggerating. Here's what we learn about him across the show's run. His father never approved of his hobbies. When Benson was growing up and pursuing his passion for drumming, his dad would tell him, "You don't have any talent, and get a real job." Despite that, Benson became an incredibly skilled drummer. He was the drummer for a hit band called Heir to the Throne, where he famously performed what fans call the legendary drum solo on a 150-piece drum kit on the band's first album. 150 pieces. That's not a drum kit. That's an installation. But the band left him completely uncredited on the album and eventually kicked him out after only 6 months, replacing him with a machine called the Drumatron 6. They literally replaced a human being, a creative soul who poured everything into his art, with a robot. And that's not even his full backstory. In Stick Hockey, which premiered as the Season 3 opener on September 19th, 2011, we learned that Benson was a stick hockey master who went by the name Death Dragon. He had an apprentice named Dave, and during a match against a player named Chong, Dave was decapitated. Benson quit immediately. He walked away from stick hockey entirely. 10 years later, in that episode, he finally confronts Chong and avenges Dave. It's a revenge story buried inside a cartoon about tabletop hockey. And the reason it works is because by that point, we understand that Benson has been carrying loss and failure for his entire life. Every time he screams at Mordecai and Rigby, it's not just frustration with bad employees. It's the accumulated weight of a man who had his dreams stolen, who lost people he cared about, and who ended up managing a park where nobody respects him. That's devastatingly real for a gumball machine on a kids show. I keep coming back to this idea that regular show hides its depth in plain sight. It looks like a show about randomness and 80s references. It sounds like a comedy, but underneath, it's dealing with failure, grief, mortality, and the terror of growing up. And nowhere is that more obvious than with Skips. Skips is voiced by Mark Hamill. Yes, that Mark Hamill. Luke Skywalker is the voice of an immortal Yeti who works as the park's handyman, and Hamill brings this incredible gravity to the character. Skips is the guy who has all the answers. Whenever Mordecai and Rigby create a supernatural problem they can't solve, they go to Skips. He always knows what to do. He's been alive for centuries. He's seen everything. But in Skip's story, which aired on April 14th, 2014, as Season 5, Episode 22, we learn why he's immortal. And it's not a reward. It's a punishment. Skip's real name is Walks. He was born sometime around the 18th or 19th century, and he was a troublemaker, expelled from 3 different high schools for fighting. At his latest school, he met a girl named Mona, and they fell in love. They used to skip everywhere together, like literally skip, feet off the ground, carefree. She made him happy. She made him want to be better. But there was also a bully named Clorgbane, a cosmic-level threat who challenged Walks to a fight. When Clorgbane attacked with his mace at prom, Mona pushed Walks out of the way. She wasn't hit by the mace directly, but the impact cracked the ceiling, and a section of it collapsed on her. She died. Right there, at prom. And I need you to think about what that means for a character on a Cartoon Network show. This is a kids' network. And they told a story about a man who watched the love of his life die in front of him because she tried to protect him. After Mona died, Walks was offered immortality, so he could fight Clorgbane every 157 years if the bully ever returned. He accepted, but the condition was that he had to change his name. And he chose Skips, because skipping was what he and Mona used to do together. Every time Skips moves, every time he skips instead of walks, he's remembering her. That's not a quirky character trait. It's a memorial. He's been carrying her memory in every step for centuries. And here's the part that gets me about this. The show mostly plays Skips for comedy. He shows up, he fixes the problem, he moves on. His immortality is usually treated as a convenient plot device. But in Skip's story, the show pauses everything and says, no, this character is in pain. He has always been in pain. And the reason he's so stoic and reserved is because he's been grieving for hundreds of years. That episode has a 9.7 rating on IMDb, which is absurdly high for a cartoon, and it deserves every point. You know what's funny? I was talking to someone about this show the other day, and they said, isn't regular show just a bunch of random stuff happening? And I get why people think that. I really do. Because on any given episode, you might see Mordecai and Rigby trying to return a VHS tape and ending up in a time warp, or trying to set up chairs for a party and accidentally summoning a demon. The randomness is the surface, but every single one of those stories is about something real underneath. Take Over the Top, which is Season 2, Episode 21. It aired in 2011. Rigby challenges Skips to an arm wrestling match and cheats using a device called the Arm Boy. Skips, in a rage, rips the Arm Boy off and forces Rigby to arm wrestle for real. The result kills Rigby. He dies. On screen. And then Skips has to arm wrestle Death himself to win Rigby's soul back. The episode title is a reference to the 1987 movie Over the Top, starring Sylvester Stallone, and on the surface, it's a ridiculous action comedy. But underneath, it's about Skip's relationship with violence and loss. He's an immortal being who's outlived everyone he's ever cared about, and in a moment of anger, he accidentally kills someone he's supposed to protect. The weight of that sits with him for the rest of the series. And Rigby dies in this show. Like, a lot. He's actually died 4 separate times across the series, and been resurrected each time. I think most animated shows would treat death as stakes-free. Character dies, comes back, no consequences. But regular show doesn't do that. Each death changes something. Each resurrection has a cost. The show takes the concept of mortality seriously, even while wrapping it in absurdist comedy. Let me shift gears here and talk about something that I think is one of the most underappreciated aspects of regular show, which is the voice acting. Because this show had one of the most unique voice casts in animation history, and the way they approached recording was completely different from standard Cartoon Network practices. Quintel voiced Mordecai himself, and High Five Ghost, which most people don't know. So the creator of the show is in the recording booth for basically every episode, performing one of the 2 lead characters. That's unusual. Most showrunners hand off voice duties to professional actors. But Quintel wanted Mordecai to sound specific, natural, conversational, like a real person, not a cartoon character. In interviews, he's explained that the intention behind the voice acting was to make most of the characters sound natural and conversational, having them not talk loudly, because he wanted the show to be listenable and to provide contrast to other cartoons, which can be difficult for adults to sit through. Then there's Sam Marin. This man voices 3 main characters. 3. Benson, Pops, and Muscle Man. And all 3 sound completely different. Benson's uptight, nasally anger. Pops is high-pitched, innocent wonder. Muscle Man's grunting, aggressive delivery. You would never know they're the same person unless someone told you. Marin was Quintel's classmate at CalArts, and they developed these characters together during those late-night short film sessions. The fact that Marin could sustain 3 distinct performances across over 260 episodes, often in scenes where his characters interact with each other, is genuinely one of the most impressive voice acting achievements I've ever seen. William Salyers plays Rigby, and he brings this incredible energy to the character. At a convention in 2025, Salyers mentioned that Over the Top was his favorite episode to work on, because he found the concept of Rigby annoying someone as mellow as Skips so badly that Skips ends up killing him to be absolutely hilarious. That's the kind of energy the cast brought to this show. They genuinely loved these characters and found joy in the insane situations they were put through. And Mark Hamill as Skips. I mean, what can you say? The man who played Luke Skywalker brings this deep, weathered gravitas to an immortal Yeti groundskeeper. Every time Skips speaks, you feel the weight of centuries. Hamill is one of the greatest voice actors in animation history, obviously, with his iconic Joker performance and dozens of other roles. But I think Skips might be his most underrated work. It's subtle, it's restrained, and in episodes like Skip's Story, it's absolutely heartbreaking. Janie Haddad Tompkins voiced Margaret, and here's a fun fact that most people don't know. Minty Lewis, who voiced Eileen, was originally a writer and storyboard artist on the show. When she wrote the line about baby sea turtle eggs in Do Me a Solid, which aired on May 2nd, 2011, as the 18th episode of Season 2, and pitched it in the writer's room, the team knew she had the perfect voice for Eileen, so they cast her. A storyboard artist became a voice actress because of how she delivered one line about turtles. That's the kind of organic, we're all just figuring this out together, energy that defined regular show's production. Speaking of do me a solid, that episode is a perfect example of something I love about this show. Eileen asks Rigby to go on a double date with her and Margaret, and Mordecai asks Rigby to do him a solid and just go along with it. What follows is an escalating chain of increasingly absurd solids that nearly tears their friendship apart. And here's the thing, Eileen, in her very first major appearance, is shown to have a crush on Rigby. Rigby knows about it. He's annoyed by it, and the show plays that dynamic for years. Eileen's feelings are treated as this persistent, low-key element that simmers in the background, while Rigby slowly, painfully, incrementally learns to appreciate her. By the time they're together in the later seasons, it feels earned because we watched both characters grow toward each other over the course of the entire series. That's long-form storytelling in a show where most episodes are 11 minutes long. Most sitcoms can't pull that off in 22-minute episodes across multiple seasons, and regular show did it in half the time. I want to talk about the 80s thing in more detail, because I don't think people realize just how deep it goes. This show doesn't just reference 80s culture, it uses it as a structural framework for storytelling. You're guaranteed to find at least one reference to something from the 1980s in every single episode. The most obvious ones are the songs, You're the Best Around and Death Punchies, Don't You, Forget About Me by Simple Minds showing up at key emotional moments, Mississippi Queen by Mountain being used for action sequences, but it goes way beyond the soundtrack. Entire episodes are structured as homages to 80s movies. Weekend at Benson's is a direct riff on Weekend at Bernie's. The Dream Warrior is clearly referencing A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. L.O. Governor, the Season 2 premiere that aired on November 29th, 2010, is about Rigby being traumatized by a horror movie about a possessed British taxi, and the episode itself is a parody of the Stephen King adaptation Christine. Even the show's approach to escalation, where a mundane situation spirals into life-or-death stakes, mirrors the structure of 80s action movies, where a regular person gets caught up in extraordinary circumstances. But here's what I think is the real key. Regular show uses 80s aesthetics as an emotional language. When the synth music kicks in during a tender moment, when a montage sequence starts during a character's training arc, when a VHS tape becomes a plot-critical object, the show is communicating something about how its characters process feeling. These characters live in a world full of modern technology, but they connect most deeply with analog experiences. Cassette tapes, arcade games, physical media. And I think that's Quintel's way of saying something about authenticity. In a digital world, the things that feel most real are the ones you can hold in your hands. There's an episode about format wars, and I need to talk about it because it perfectly encapsulates the show's relationship with technology and nostalgia. Format Wars features a conflict between VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, and streaming, personified as actual characters who fight each other. It's silly on the surface, but it's also about how we discard things the moment something newer comes along, how we treat improvement as replacement instead of evolution. VHS didn't stop being meaningful just because Blu-ray exists. The memories associated with those tapes, the act of rewinding, the texture of the image, those have value independent of technical quality. And regular show understood that in a way that very few shows aimed at young audiences ever have. Remember what I said earlier about the show hiding its depth in plain sight? I want to keep pulling on that thread with what might be the show's single greatest achievement. The Emmy-winning episode, Eggcellent. Eggcellent aired during Season 3, and won the Emmy for Outstanding Short-Format Animated Program. It's about Rigby attempting to eat a massive omelet at a restaurant to win a hat, falling into a coma in the process, and Mordecai taking up the challenge to finish what Rigby started. On paper, that sounds like standard cartoon fare. A food challenge. A silly hat. What could possibly be profound about that? Everything. Because the hat doesn't matter. The omelet doesn't matter. What matters is that Mordecai is fighting for his friend. Rigby is in a coma, and nobody else seems to care enough to try. Everyone tells Mordecai to give up. The challenge is impossible. The hat is stupid. But Mordecai doesn't care about the hat. He cares about Rigby. He cares about the principle that if your best friend commits to something, even something dumb, you finish it for them when they can't. That's the entire episode. A man refusing to give up on his friend. And it won an Emmy. Here's the behind-the-scenes story that makes this even better. Quintel based Eggcellent on a real experience. He and his brother once tried to eat a 12-egg omelet at a restaurant called the Broken Yolk Cafe in San Diego, California. The real challenge is almost identical to what's shown in the episode. You get 2 biscuits, a dozen eggs, mushrooms, onions, chili, and cheese. You have under an hour to eat it. If you finish, your entire party eats for free. Quintel and his brother failed. They couldn't finish, but the experience stuck with him enough that years later, he turned it into what became the show's most awarded episode. I love that. I love that the most celebrated moment in regular show's history came from Quintel and his brother failing to eat breakfast. At a 2025 convention, Sam Marin revealed that Eggcellent was his favorite episode of the series. And I think that says something about the kind of show regular show was. The episode their Emmy-winning work came from wasn't about cosmic battles or elaborate mythology. It was about eggs and friendship. That's the show in a nutshell. And I want to pause here and mention something about the Garrett Bobby Ferguson episodes, because there's a real-world story behind them that most people don't know. Garrett Bobby Ferguson, or GBF, first appears in High Score, which aired during Season 2. He's a giant floating head who holds the universe record for the arcade game Broken Bones, and he's determined to keep his title. His face closely resembles that of Billy Mitchell, the real-life competitive gamer who was once called the greatest arcade video game player of all time. Mitchell actually sued Cartoon Network over the resemblance. The case, Billy Mitchell versus the Cartoon Network Incorporated, was a real lawsuit that alleged defamation. GBF explodes in a spray of goo when Mordecai and Rigby beat his high score, and Mitchell argued that having a character who looks like him die in such a humiliating way was damaging to his reputation. The case was eventually resolved, but the fact that a regular show villain caused a real-world lawsuit tells you something about how recognizable the show's references were. They weren't subtle homages. They were direct, and sometimes the real world noticed. GBF comes back in Exit 9B through his son, Garrett Bobby Ferguson Jr., who revives every villain from the first 3 seasons to get revenge on the park crew. It's the show's first real attempt at an Avengers moment, bringing together all the threats from previous episodes into one massive confrontation. And it works because the show had been quietly building that rogues gallery without anyone realizing it. Each standalone villain from each standalone episode was actually a piece of a larger puzzle. The show didn't plan that from the beginning. It recognized in retrospect what it had built, and then capitalized on it. That's smart storytelling. Now let's talk about the relationship storylines, because this is where regular show did something that I think was genuinely brave for a Cartoon Network show, even if it didn't always stick the landing. Mordecai's romantic arc across the series is messy. It's really messy. And I mean that as both a description and a compliment, because real relationships are messy, and most cartoons pretend they're not. Margaret serves as Mordecai's primary love interest through seasons 1 through 3. She works at a coffee shop. Mordecai has an obvious crush on her. And for 3 seasons, the show does this slow burn, will they or won't they, dance that anyone who's ever had a crush in their early 20s can relate to. Mordecai is bad at expressing his feelings. He gets tongue-tied. He overthinks everything. He invents reasons not to make a move. It's excruciating to watch. And it's excruciating because it's true. That's exactly what being 23 and in love and terrified feels like. They eventually date in season 4. They kiss. It's a big moment. And then in Stake Me Amadeus, the season 4 finale, Mordecai finally works up the courage to ask Margaret to be his official girlfriend. He takes her to a fancy restaurant. He has a whole plan, and Margaret says no. Not because she doesn't have feelings for him, but because she's been accepted into her dream college and she can't stay. She chooses her future over the relationship. And Mordecai is devastated, completely destroyed, and the show doesn't rush past it. It lets him sit in that pain. Season 5 introduces CJ, or Cloudy J, who first appeared in the Season 3 episode Yes Dude, Yes, airing on May 7th, 2012. CJ is voiced by Linda Cardellini, and she's immediately compelling as a character. She's a cloud humanoid who literally turns into a storm when she gets angry. She and Mordecai have genuine chemistry. They get along in ways that Mordecai and Margaret never quite did. CJ is funnier, more relaxed, more compatible with who Mordecai actually is, as opposed to who he wants to be. And their relationship in seasons 5 and 6 is genuinely sweet. But then Margaret comes back. And this is where things get complicated. In Merry Christmas, Mordecai, Season 6, Episode 10, Mordecai and Margaret accidentally kiss at a Christmas party while CJ is there. CJ sees it. She's heartbroken. She runs out and drives away. And the love triangle that follows consumed the fan community. People took sides. Margaret fans versus CJ fans. The discourse was intense. Here's my honest take on this. I think the show handled the love triangle imperfectly, but honestly. Mordecai doesn't know what he wants. He's drawn to Margaret because she represents his past, his comfort zone, the person he's been pining for since the beginning. But CJ is his present, the person who actually works in his life right now. And he can't commit to either one because committing means letting go of the other. That's incredibly real. That's what people actually do in their 20s. They don't make clean choices. They don't have tidy romantic arcs. They hurt people they care about because they're too afraid to make a decision. The whole thing comes to a head in Dumped at the Altar, the season 6 finale that aired on June 25th, 2015. It's supposed to be Muscle Man and Starla's wedding day, but Mordecai can't stop making it about himself. He tries to dump CJ at the wedding. Muscle Man calls him out for it. The episode was panned by fans and critics. Some viewers actually stopped watching the series after that episode. And I get it. It's painful to watch. Mordecai is actively being a bad person. But I also think the backlash proved that the show was doing its job. If Mordecai's mistakes didn't bother you, the writing wasn't working. The fact that people were angry means the show made them care. And here's the kicker. In the series finale, 25 years into the future, Mordecai doesn't end up with Margaret or CJ. He marries a completely different woman named Steph, a fellow artist he met at an art convention. They have 3 kids together. They're happy. And I think that's the most realistic ending the show could have given him. Sometimes the great love of your early 20s isn't the person you end up with. Sometimes you grow into a different person who needs different things. And the person you're supposed to be with is someone you haven't even met yet. Most shows would never have the courage to do that. Most shows would pair Mordecai with Margaret in the finale and call it a day. But Quintel did something braver. He said, the person you're obsessed with at 23 might not be the person you build a life with. And that's okay. That's growing up. I've been thinking about that ending a lot while putting this video together. And honestly, I think it might be the most grown-up thing a Cartoon Network show has ever done. And before I move on from the romantic storylines, I want to highlight something that happened in between the Margaret and CJ eras that I think is crucial to understanding Mordecai as a character. Picking Up Margaret is a season 4 episode where Mordecai offers to give Margaret a ride to the airport. Simple enough, right? But along the way, they encounter a street gang called the Wickets, and the episode becomes this action-packed road trip that culminates in Mordecai and Margaret sharing their first kiss. Here's what I love about that. The kiss doesn't happen at a romantic dinner or a beautiful sunset. It happens after they've been chased through the city by a violent gang. It happens in the aftermath of chaos. And I think that's incredibly telling. Mordecai can't express his feelings in normal circumstances. He needs the world to be falling apart around him before he can be honest about what he wants. The escalation isn't just the show's comedy formula. It's also Mordecai's emotional crutch. He can only be vulnerable when everything else is already out of control. That's a deeply human character flaw, and the show understood it perfectly. And while we're talking about character flaws and growth, I need to bring up Regular Show, the movie. This was a feature-length animated film that premiered on August 14th, 2015, at the Downtown Independent Theater in Los Angeles. The movie reveals something that recontextualizes the entire Mordecai-Rigby dynamic. When they were in high school, Mordecai and Rigby both applied to their dream school, College University. Rigby was accepted. Mordecai was not. But here's the twist. Rigby faked his own rejection letter so he and Mordecai wouldn't be separated. He gave up his college education so their friendship could continue. I need you to sit with that for a second. Rigby, the character everyone calls lazy and unmotivated and irresponsible, sacrificed his future because he didn't want to lose his best friend. He chose Mordecai over opportunity, over education, over everything his life could have been. And he never told anyone. He carried that secret for years, letting everyone, including Mordecai, believe he was too stupid to get in. The movie forces this truth to the surface when their former teacher, Mr. Ross, who was arrested because their time machine experiment went wrong, weaponizes a time nado for revenge. In a dark alternate future, Mordecai discovers what Rigby did, and it destroys their friendship. Future Mordecai becomes a villain, consumed by resentment. Future Rigby is alone. The movie shows them the worst-case scenario of their relationship, the version of events where bitterness wins and friendship loses. But in the present, Mordecai and Rigby make a different choice. They forgive each other. They agree not to let their friendship degrade into trying to kill each other. And that decision literally erases the dark future and rewrites their timeline. The movie is saying that forgiveness isn't just an emotion. It's an action that changes reality. In regular show's universe, where feelings have tangible consequences, and emotions create monsters and portals and cosmic battles, choosing to forgive someone actually reshapes the world. That's beautiful storytelling, and it retroactively explains so much about the series. Every time Rigby acts lazy, every time he avoids responsibility, every time he takes a shortcut, there's a new dimension to it. He's a guy who gave up his entire future for his friend, and then has to live every day knowing that his friend doesn't know. That's not laziness. That's a man who made one enormous sacrifice and then ran out of motivation for anything else. The biggest decision of his life was already behind him, and it went unrecognized. Let me talk about Muscle Man, because his character arc might be the show's biggest surprise. When Muscle Man first appears, he is, and I say this with love, absolutely unbearable. He's gross. He's loud. He tells "my mom" jokes constantly, which are basically failed "your mom" jokes, because Muscle Man words them so they insult himself instead of the other person. High Five Ghost is the only character who laughs at them. Everyone else just endures them. In the first 2 seasons, Muscle Man has a genuine rivalry with Mordecai and Rigby. He pranks them relentlessly. He's the worst. And then, slowly, the show starts peeling back layers. In Trucker Hall of Fame, which is Season 3, Episode 30, first airing the day after Father's Day in 2012, we learn that Muscle Man's father, Muscle Dad, has died. The episode follows Muscle Man, Mordecai, and Rigby on a road trip to spread Muscle Dad's ashes, which are contained in his trucker hat at the Trucker Hall of Fame. And during the journey, they discover something devastating. Muscle Dad wasn't a trucker at all. He was a forklift operator. He told his son he was a trucker because he wanted Muscle Man to be proud of him. A father lied about his job because he wanted his son's respect. And then he died. And Muscle Man never got to tell him it didn't matter. That's the episode where Muscle Man transforms from a one-note joke into a real character. From that point forward, every "my mom" joke, every obnoxious prank, every loud outburst reads differently. This is a man who lost his father, who processes grief through humor, who hides vulnerability behind a wall of bravado. The show earns that depth. It doesn't just assign it. It builds toward it. And then there's his relationship with Starla. Starla is basically the female version of Muscle Man. She's loud. She's physical. She's not conventionally attractive by the show's standards. And she and Muscle Man love each other with an intensity that's frankly beautiful. In the end of Muscle Man proposes to Starla. He does it by making everyone think he's literally dying, because his idea of a romantic gesture is a prank taken to its absolute extreme. Starla initially rejects the proposal because he's talking about giving up his Muscle Man identity and becoming plain old Mitch Sorenstein. She fell in love with Muscle Man, not Mitch. So he promises not to change, and she says yes. Nobody but High Five Ghost congratulates him. Everyone else is furious because they thought he was actually dying, and honestly, that might be my favorite running joke in the entire series. High Five Ghost is the only person who consistently understands Muscle Man. He's the only one who laughs at his jokes. He's the only one who sees past the obnoxiousness. And in this moment, he's the only one who immediately celebrates his best friend's engagement, while everyone else is still processing their anger. If Mordecai and Rigby represent the messy, complicated version of male friendship, Muscle Man and High Five Ghost represent the unconditional version. High Five Ghost never questions Muscle Man, never judges him, never asks him to be different. He just accepts him, completely, as he is. And in a show full of complicated relationships, that simplicity is beautiful. I also want to point out something about Muscle Man's real name, because it connects to a broader theme in the show. His name is Mitch Sorenstein, and we almost never hear it. He's Muscle Man to everyone. The persona is the person. When he talks about giving up the Muscle Man identity to marry Starla, he's talking about the only version of himself anyone has ever known. And Starla's refusal to accept his proposal unless he stays Muscle Man isn't shallow. It's her way of saying, I love who you are. Don't become someone else for me. In a show that constantly explores the tension between who you are and who people expect you to be, Muscle Man and Starla's relationship is unique because they've already resolved that tension. They're completely themselves with each other. No masks, no performance. Just two loud, messy, deeply committed people who found each other and held on. And that's Muscle Man in a nutshell. Even his best moments are wrapped in chaos that he created himself. But the love between him and Starla is real. It's one of the most genuine romantic relationships in the entire show, precisely because it's not pretty. It's weird and loud and messy, just like they are. The wedding happens in Dumped at the Altar, and in the series finale epilogue, we learn that Starla had a daughter during the park crew's 3-year absence in space, and they went on to have more children and live happily together. Muscle Man got a happy ending. The most annoying character on the show, the one most viewers couldn't stand in season 1, got the happiest ending of anyone. I think Quintel did that on purpose. I think he wanted to reward the audience for sticking with Muscle Man long enough to see who he really was underneath the jokes and the pranks and the constant yelling. Okay, I want to switch to talking about something that I don't think enough people appreciate about this show, which is how it handles death. Not metaphorical death. Not character goes away for a while death. Actual, permanent, you are gone and never coming back death. Pops dies in the series finale. Let me say that again. Pops, the sweetest, most innocent, most purely good character on the entire show, dies. And he doesn't come back. To understand why that matters, you need to understand what the show did with Pops across season 8. The entire final season takes place in space, and it gradually reveals that Pops isn't just some naive old man with a lollipop-shaped head. He's a cosmic being. He has a twin brother, Anti-Pops, who is essentially the embodiment of destruction. And these two have been fighting each other in an endless cycle throughout the history of the universe. Every time they fight, the universe resets. Every time, Pops tries to win through kindness. Every time, it doesn't work. The cycle repeats. In the series finale, a regular epic final battle, which aired on January 16th, 2017, Pops figures out the only way to break the cycle. He doesn't fight Anti-Pops. He doesn't defeat him. He hugs him, and then he throws both of them into a star. They die together, and the cycle is broken. The universe is saved, but Pops is gone. The finale was viewed by 1.33 million viewers for part 1 and 1.37 million for parts 2 and 3, making it the most watched episode of the 8th season. It currently has a 9.9 rating on IMDb. And that final moment where we see Pops in what appears to be an afterlife, watching his friends on a VHS tape labeled Regular Show, ejecting the tape and saying, "Jolly good show." That is one of the most devastating endings in animation history. He's watching us. He was watching us the whole time, and now he's saying goodbye. I'm going to be real with you. That scene hits me different every time I watch it. The first time, I was shocked. The second time, I was sad. And every time after that, I just feel this profound gratitude that a show aimed at children had the courage to say, good people die. Even the best people die. And the world goes on without them. And it's sadder for their absence. And all you can do is remember them. That's not a lesson most adults can articulate clearly, let alone teach to an audience that includes 12-year-olds. But Regular Show did it with a lollipop man and a VHS tape. And you know what else kills me about that finale? The way the show handles Anti-Pops. Anti-Pops isn't evil for the sake of being evil. He's Pops' opposite. If Pops represents creation and kindness and the impulse to preserve, Anti-Pops represents entropy and cruelty and the impulse to destroy. They're two sides of the same cosmic coin, and they've been fighting forever. Literally forever. Across multiple iterations of the universe, they've clashed, and every time, the result is the same. Destruction, reset, start over. The cycle repeats. In Kill 'Em With Kindness, which airs earlier in Season 8, Pops trains to gain immense strength and telepathy. Despite his friend's doubts, he arranges a meeting with Auntie Pops to try to make peace. Auntie Pops rejects it. He attacks. And Pops realizes that some enemies truly cannot be reasoned with. But he never gives up on the idea that kindness is stronger than force, even when every piece of evidence says otherwise. Even when the universe itself is structured around their eternal conflict. Pops believes that the cycle can be broken through love instead of violence. And in the end, he's right. The hug, the star, the sacrifice. Pops proves that the cycle can be broken, but only if someone is willing to give up everything. Not to win, not to defeat the enemy, but to hold them close and say, we don't have to do this anymore, and then to let go together. I've watched a lot of series finales. A lot of them try to be epic. A lot of them try to be emotional. Very few succeed at being both. A regular epic final battle is epic and emotional and devastating and hopeful and quiet and loud and everything a finale should be. It's the best series finale Cartoon Network has ever produced, and I'll stand by that statement. After Pop's sacrifice, the park crew returns to Earth. They've been gone for 3 years. The epilogue jumps forward 25 years to a reunion at the park, and we see where everyone ended up. Mordecai became a successful painter, married Steph, had 3 kids. Rigby married Eileen, had kids of his own. Muscle Man and Starla built a family. Benson is older. Mr. Maylard, Pops' father, is shown staring at the sky, shedding a tear for his late son. It's implied he dies of grief before the reunion. And here's the detail that wrecks me. At the reunion, Rigby says, "Man, I can't believe it's been 25 years. And Mordecai responds, "Yeah, I wish Pops could have been here to see this. They've grown up. They've become adults." They've done all the things the show spent 8 seasons wondering if they were capable of. And the one person who always believed in them, who never doubted them, who loved them unconditionally from the very first episode, isn't there to see it. That's what this show is about. That's what it was always about. Growing up means losing things. Becoming an adult means watching the world change around you in ways you can't control. And the people who shaped you, the people who made you who you are, they don't always get to see the finished product. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't a light video. So let me keep going. I want to talk about some of the production details that most people don't know about, because the way this show was made is almost as interesting as the show itself. Each episode of regular show took approximately 9 months to complete. 9 months. For 11 minutes of television. Quintel and his 35-member team at Cartoon Network Studios in Burbank, California, usually had 20 episodes in production simultaneously at any given time. The workflow was specific. First, the script was illustrated in rough, hand-drawn storyboards. Those storyboards were animated and mixed with the corresponding dialogue to create an animatic. The animatic went to the network for approval. Then the show's assets, backgrounds, character designs, props, everything, were assembled and sent to Serom Animation in South Korea, where the actual animation production happened. When that was finished, the episode came back to California, where Saber Media Studios handled music, sound effects, and the final mix. So every time you watch an 11-minute episode of regular show, you're looking at the result of a 9-month, 2-continent production pipeline that involved dozens of artists, animators, writers, and voice actors. That's wild to me. The show feels spontaneous. It feels loose and improvisational. But behind the scenes, it was a massive logistical operation that required the kind of planning and coordination most viewers never think about. And here's another production detail I find fascinating. The pilot, First Day, was originally animated in Flash before being redone in hand-drawn animation. That Flash version exists somewhere, but it's considered lost media. Only 2 short clips have ever surfaced. I mentioned this earlier, but I want to emphasize how strange that is. There is a complete version of the first regular show episode, animated in a completely different style, and nobody can find it. In an era where everything is archived and preserved and uploaded, this pilot exists in the void. If someone at Cartoon Network has it on a hard drive somewhere, I need them to know that the fans are waiting. Let me talk about Thomas, because his story is one of the most genuinely shocking reveals in animated television. Thomas was introduced in Exit 9B, the Season 4 premiere that aired on October 1st, 2012, and received 3.047 million viewers. He was the park's new intern, a goat. Quiet, kind of awkward, seemed like a normal college-age kid doing a summer job. He hung around for 3 full seasons, appearing in episodes here and there, never doing anything particularly notable. He was just there, part of the background, the most unremarkable character on a show full of memorable ones. And then, in The Real Thomas, a Season 6 special, Rigby discovers that Thomas is a Russian spy. His real name is Nikolai. He was abandoned by his parents, adopted by Russia, and trained as a perfect weapon to infiltrate the park and steal it for the Russian government. They planned to literally rocket the entire park to Russia. 3 seasons. Thomas was a spy for 3 seasons, and nobody, not the characters and not the audience, had any idea. But here's what makes it great. When Russia reveals their true plan, which is to destroy the park rather than steal it, Thomas turns against them to save his friends. He's been lying to everyone, but the friendships he formed were real. The people who treated him like family actually became his family. And when he has to choose between the country that raised him and the friends who accepted him, he chooses the friends. He goes into hiding. The park crew never sees him again in the original series. He just vanishes. I actually have a theory about Thomas that I've never heard anyone else bring up. I think Thomas is regular show's version of the sleeper agent archetype, but inverted. In a traditional spy story, the sleeper agent's connections are tools. They use people to achieve their mission. But Thomas's connections became the mission. Saving his friends became more important than whatever Russia wanted. The show is saying that genuine connection is more powerful than programming, that even someone designed to be a weapon can be disarmed by kindness. And it does it all through a goat intern on a cartoon. That's incredible storytelling. Let me circle back to something I touched on earlier, the production timeline of the show as a whole. Regular show premiered on September 6th, 2010, with Season 1 consisting of only 12 episodes. Season 2 followed quickly, starting on November 29th, 2010, with Hello Governor, and ran for 28 episodes. Season 3 started on September 19th, 2011, with Stick Hockey, and consisted of 39 episodes. From there, the show settled into a rhythm, producing longer seasons with more ambitious specials and multi-part episodes. The show ran for 8 seasons and over 260 episodes total. The exact number depends on whether you count multi-part episodes as one episode or separate them, but however you slice it, regular show produced over 260 episodes of consistently creative, emotionally resonant television over the course of 7 years. That's an achievement by any standard. I want to talk about the Terror Tales episodes, because I think they're some of the most creatively ambitious things the show ever did. Starting in Season 3, regular show produced annual Halloween specials called Terror Tales of the Park. These were anthology episodes, directly inspired by The Simpsons' Treehouse of Horror format, where each character tells a scary story, and the segments are self-contained mini-episodes within the larger framework. What made the Terror Tales specials special, though, was that they gave the writers permission to go places the regular episodes couldn't. Characters could die permanently. Darker themes could be explored. The animation style could shift. And because the stories were presented as fiction within fiction, the show could push its TVPG rating further than usual. Over the course of the series, there were 6 Terror Tales specials, 1 per season from Season 3 through Season 8. They became an annual tradition, something fans looked forward to every October, and some of the series' most memorable individual segments came from these episodes. Terror Tales of the Park 2, which aired in Season 4, pulled in 3.109 million viewers, which was actually a series record at the time, beating Exit 9B. That's right, the Halloween episode got more viewers than the action-packed season premiere. People love regular show when it's being scary, and honestly, the show was always better at horror than most people give it credit for. Hello Governor is genuinely unsettling. The possessed British taxi, rendered in the show's deceptively simple animation style, taps into a primal fear of being chased by something relentless and inhuman. It's basically Christine for 12-year-olds, and it works. Let me talk about the baby ducks, because they're a perfect example of how regular show builds continuity out of the most unexpected places. In A Bunch of Baby Ducks, Season 2, Episode 23, airing on June 6th, 2011, Mordecai and Rigby find baby ducks in a park fountain. The ducks imprint on Rigby and start imitating everything he does, including karate chops. It's adorable. It's funny. It seems like a one-off episode. But then the baby ducks come back, and they come back again. They become recurring characters with their own arc. They grow. They develop abilities. And by the time of the series finale, they're among the allies who show up to help fight Anti-Pop's forces. Baby ducks from a fountain episode in Season 2 become cosmic warriors in the series finale. That is the kind of long-form payoff that most shows dream about. Regular show did it with ducks. And that leads me to something I've been wanting to talk about, which is how regular show built its mythology. Because this show didn't start with lore. There was no grand plan for a cosmic battle between Pops and Anti-Pops when Quintel was making the pilot. The mythology grew organically, episode by episode, season by season, each new detail adding to a larger picture that didn't fully reveal itself until the very end. Exit 9B is a great example of this. That Season 4 premiere brought back every villain from the first 3 seasons in one massive battle. And in doing so, it retroactively established that everything that had happened in the show was connected. Every monster Mordecai and Rigby had faced, every supernatural entity they'd defeated, every escalation that had resolved, all of it was part of a larger pattern. The show was building a rogues gallery without announcing it. And when those villains all showed up at once, the audience realized that regular show had been telling a much bigger story than they thought. The same thing happens with the recurring allies. Gary, Death, Tecmo, the God of Basketball, the Guardians of Eternal Youth. These characters pop up across the series in seemingly standalone episodes. But in Exit 9B, they all arrive to help. They're not just one-off characters. They're part of a community, a network of beings connected to the park. And the park isn't just a workplace. It's a nexus, a center of power, which, when you think about it, explains why so many supernatural things happen there. The park is special. It's always been special. And Mordecai and Rigby's job isn't just mowing lawns. Whether they know it or not, they're guardians of something. I've rewatched Exit 9B 3 times while working on this video, and each time I noticed new details in the background, characters from episodes I'd forgotten about. Visual callbacks that reward obsessive viewers. The episode received over 3 million viewers for a reason. It's the show at its most ambitious, at its most confident, at its most aware of what it had built over 4 seasons. And it's only Season 4. The show was halfway done, and already pulling off this kind of density. Okay, let's talk about something that I think is genuinely surprising to people who haven't looked into it, which is how significant regular show was in terms of ratings and awards. This wasn't a niche show. This wasn't a cult favorite that only animation nerds watched. At its peak, regular show was one of the highest rated programs on Cartoon Network. The show was nominated for 7 Annie Awards, 6 Primetime Emmy Awards, and 3 British Academy Children's Awards. It won the Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Short Format Animated Program for Excellent. That's a real Emmy, not an Annie Award, which is animation industry specific. A Primetime Emmy. The same award category that's been won by shows with massive budgets and prestigious pedigrees. And regular show won it with an episode about a guy trying to eat eggs to win a hat for his friend. That Emmy win is important because it validated what the show's fans already knew, which is that regular show was operating on a level that transcended its perceived audience. This wasn't just a good cartoon, it was good television, period, and the industry recognized that. Let me get into some of the more obscure facts now, the stuff that even dedicated fans might not know, because that's what this video is about. And if you're still here at this point, you're ready for the deep cuts. There's another production fact that I think is really interesting. The show used a system where episodes were developed simultaneously at different stages of production. While one episode was being written, another was being storyboarded. Another was being sent to Korea for animation, and another was being mixed in post-production. With 20 episodes in various stages at any given time, Quintel had to maintain a mental map of the entire season's emotional and narrative arc, while individual episodes were scattered across the globe in different states of completion. That's an organizational nightmare, and yet the show feels cohesive. It feels intentional. The fact that Quintel could keep all those plates spinning while also voicing the lead character and maintaining his creative vision is, frankly, superhuman. I also want to mention that Serom Animation, the studio in South Korea that handled the actual animation production, deserves enormous credit for the show's visual quality. Animation outsourcing is standard practice in the industry, but the relationship between Cartoon Network Studios and Serom was particularly strong. The character animation in regular show has a fluidity and expressiveness that elevates the comedy. Watch how Rigby moves. He's always fidgeting, always bouncing, always in motion. That's not just character design, that's animation acting. The animators at Serom understood these characters well enough to give them distinct physical vocabularies. Mordecai is smoother, more deliberate. Rigby is twitchy, impulsive. Benson is rigid until he explodes. Pops is floaty and graceful. Skips is heavy and grounded. Every character moves differently, and those movement patterns communicate personality as effectively as the dialogue does. Here's one. Skips is the only character on the entire show to have 5 fingers. Every other character has 4 fingers, which is standard for cartoon character design. But Skips has 5. There's a theory that this is a reference to The Simpsons, where only God and Jesus have 5 fingers, while every other character has 4. If that's intentional, and given that Quintel has cited The Simpsons as one of his favorite shows growing up, it probably is, then it's a subtle visual cue that Skips isn't like the other characters. He's something more. He's immortal. He's been around since before any of them were born. And his hands, of all things, are what set him apart. And here's a detail that connects to the voice cast. Roger Craig Smith, who you might know as the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog in recent years, voiced Thomas. That means the character who was secretly a Russian spy for 3 seasons was being voiced by one of the most recognizable voices in gaming. And nobody made the connection while the show was airing because Smith played Thomas so completely against type. Thomas is quiet, unassuming, forgettable. That's the opposite of everything Smith usually does. And that performance choice is part of why the spy reveal works so well. Smith deliberately made Thomas boring. He stripped all personality from his delivery so that the character would fade into the background. That's acting. That's a deliberate choice to be unremarkable so that the eventual reveal hits harder. And I think Smith deserves way more credit for that than he gets. Here's another one. High Five Ghost has a shadow. That might sound like nothing, but think about it. He's a ghost. Ghosts don't typically cast shadows, but High Five Ghost does. Whether this is an intentional detail or an animation oversight that became canon, it adds to the show's quietly surreal world building. In a universe where a gumball machine can be someone's boss and a Yeti can be immortal, the rules of reality are flexible, but they're consistent. High Five Ghost always has a shadow. It's always there, and nobody in the show ever comments on it. Remember what I said about the show's origins at CalArts? Here's another connection most people miss. Quintel was classmates with Pendleton Ward, the creator of Adventure Time. These 2 shows, which became the twin pillars of Cartoon Network's Renaissance era, were created by friends who went to the same school, took the same classes, probably critiqued each other's student films. That era of Cartoon Network, roughly 2010 to 2017, is now referred to by fans as the CN Renaissance, and it includes Regular Show, Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and The Amazing World of Gumball. The fact that 2 of those 4 shows came from CalArts classmates is not a coincidence. Those late-night short film sessions, the creative culture of that school, the emphasis on personal vision over commercial appeal, that's what produced both shows. And I think they pushed each other. Adventure Time was weird and emotionally raw, and Regular Show responded by being grounded and emotionally honest. They complemented each other perfectly. There's another obscure fact about the show that I want to share before we keep going. Prank Callers is the 9th episode of Season 1, airing on November 1st, 2010. In this episode, Mordecai and Rigby try to prank call the legendary Master Prank Caller, and they get transported back to 1982 for their trouble. The Master Prank Caller is a white 80s style cell phone with human arms and legs, and beneath the phone casing is a wizened, pasty old man in poor health. He's voiced by Tim Curry. Yes, Tim Curry. The show quietly got Tim Curry for a season 1 guest role, and most people don't even know. And there's a visual gag in that episode that few people catch. The reveal of the Master Prank Caller's true face underneath his phone exterior mirrors the scene in Return of the Jedi, when Luke removes Darth Vader's mask and sees the frail old man beneath. It's a Star Wars reference hidden inside an 80s time travel episode with Tim Curry voicing a telephone villain. That is peak regular show. And speaking of time travel, Prank Callers sends Mordecai and Rigby to 1982, which is basically Quintel's creative promised land. The 80s aren't just aesthetic decoration for this show. They're a literal destination. The characters physically travel to the decade that defines their world's cultural vocabulary. It's the show saying, this era isn't just something we reference, it's something we inhabit. The 80s are as real a place in the regular show universe as the park itself. Let me also mention Busted Cart, Season 3, Episode 26, which aired on May 14th, 2012, because it's one of the best Benson-focused episodes, and it reveals so much about his relationship with Mordecai and Rigby. After Mordecai and Rigby crash the golf cart, Benson has to drive to a dealership to get it fixed before the warranty expires. Mordecai and Rigby stow away in his truck. When Benson discovers them, he's furious, but he doesn't have time to take them back, so they're stuck together on this road trip. And what follows is one of the most honest depictions of the Benson-Mordecai-Rigby dynamic in the entire series. When Mordecai and Rigby spend all night in an arcade instead of sleeping, Benson erupts. But it's not just anger. There's genuine grief in his voice. He explains that their actions have consequences, that he will lose his job if the cart doesn't get turned in on time. And for once, Mordecai and Rigby actually hear him. They feel horrible. They steal the Ranger truck and take Highway 13, the most dangerous highway in the country, a road filled with collapsing cliffs, spike strips, falling boulders, pools of lava, and something that looks like a portal to the underworld. Benson catches up to them on a motorcycle, and together, all three of them navigate this impossible road to make the deadline. What I love about that episode is that it shows Benson's authority isn't arbitrary. He's not yelling because he enjoys it. He's yelling because he's scared. He's scared of losing his job. He's scared of being seen as a failure. He's scared that the two employees he secretly cares about are going to cost him everything he's barely holding together. And when Mordecai and Rigby finally understand that, when they finally see Benson's anger for what it really is, which is fear, they step up. They take the dangerous shortcut, not because they're heroes, but because for the first time, they understand what's at stake for someone other than themselves. That's growth. That's empathy. And it happens in an 11-minute episode about a broken golf cart. I want to go back to the escalation formula one more time, because I think there's an obscure detail about it that most people don't notice. The escalation in regular show almost always follows the same structural pattern. Stage 1, Mordecai and Rigby have a simple task. Stage 2, they try to shortcut it. Stage 3, the shortcut introduces a supernatural element. Stage 4, the supernatural element spirals out of control. Stage 5, they have to solve the problem they created, usually with help from skips. Stage 6, the status quo is restored, but something has changed, even if it's subtle. That 6th stage is what separates regular show from shows that just reset at the end of every episode. After every escalation, something is different. A relationship has shifted. A character has learned something. A piece of lore has been established. The park always survives, but it's never exactly the same park it was before the episode started. And over the course of over 260 episodes, those tiny changes accumulate into massive character growth. Mordecai in Season 1 and Mordecai in Season 8 are barely recognizable as the same person, but the change happens so gradually that you never notice it happening. You only see it when you look back. And I want to point something out about the escalation formula that ties back to the 80s references. The structure of a regular show escalation, mundane task leads to supernatural crisis, leads to dramatic resolution, is basically the structure of an 80s movie. Think about it. In The Karate Kid, a kid just wants to not get bullied, and it ends with a tournament that feels life or death. In Back to the Future, Marty just wants to get home, and it becomes a race against the erasure of his own existence. In Ghostbusters, 3 unemployed professors start a pest control business, and it ends with a giant marshmallow man attacking New York City. The 80s movie formula is the regular show formula. Quintel didn't just reference 80s culture aesthetically, he absorbed its narrative DNA. The way 80s movies treat everyday people as the heroes of cosmic scale stories is exactly how regular show treats Mordecai and Rigby. 2 park employees who are constantly caught up in adventures that are way bigger than they are, but who rise to the occasion every time, because that's what the heroes of 80s movies do. They don't ask for it. They're not chosen ones. They're just regular guys who step up. And that connection between the show's structure and its primary cultural influence has never been adequately appreciated, in my opinion. It's not just about synth music and VHS tapes. It's about believing that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That's the heart of 80s cinema. And it's the heart of regular show. That's something I think about a lot. How growth sneaks up on you. How you never feel yourself changing in the moment. You only realize you've grown when you compare who you are now to who you were years ago. Regular show understood that. It didn't have big transformation moments where characters announced their growth. It let growth happen naturally, in the background, through hundreds of small choices and consequences. Let me talk about a few more episodes that I think contain the kind of obscure details this video is all about. Appreciation Day, Season 2, Episode 3, airing on January 10th, 2011. Mordecai and Rigby discover the Book of Park Records, and they realize that everything written in this book comes true. So naturally, they start rewriting their entries to make themselves look like better employees. A blizzard appears. A snow monster called Snowballs attacks. The book is nearly destroyed. It's a cautionary tale about rewriting your own narrative, about the danger of controlling how people perceive you instead of actually improving. And it's also, weirdly, the show's most direct statement about storytelling itself. What you write becomes reality. Words have power. Be careful what story you tell. Rigby's Body, which aired on November 15th, 2010, in Season 1, is another one. Rigby eats so much junk food that his body literally separates from him. His body walks away. It just leaves. And Rigby has to convince his own body to come back. On one level, it's gross out comedy. On another level, it's an episode about the consequences of self-neglect. About how if you treat your body badly enough, it'll give up on you. The fact that a cartoon aimed at kids made that metaphor literal is quietly genius. And I want to mention More Smarter again, because there's a detail about it that I love. When Mordecai and Rigby both drink the intelligence-boosting chemical and become super smart, they don't become better people. They become worse. They become arrogant, competitive, cruel. The episode is saying that intelligence without wisdom is dangerous. That knowing more doesn't mean understanding more. Smart Rigby and smart Mordecai are meaner than their regular selves, not kinder. And I think that's a surprisingly sophisticated observation for an 11-minute cartoon. The smartest person in the room isn't always the wisest. Being clever doesn't make you good. I actually have a theory about why regular show resonated so strongly with its audience. And it's something I've never heard anyone else articulate in quite this way. I think it's because the show treats its characters' everyday problems as genuinely important. Most shows aimed at young audiences frame adult concerns as boring. Work is dull. Responsibility is a drag. Being a grown-up is something to avoid. But regular show takes the opposite approach. Mordecai and Rigby's jobs matter. Setting up chairs for a party matters. Returning a video matters. Cleaning a fountain matters. These mundane tasks are treated with the same narrative weight as the supernatural crises they escalate into. And I think that's incredibly validating for an audience of teenagers and young adults who are starting to realize that their daily lives have stakes, even if those stakes aren't cosmic. The show says, your life is not boring. Your choices have consequences. The mundane and the extraordinary exist on the same spectrum. And for a generation of viewers who were growing up in a world that told them nothing matters unless it goes viral, that message was revolutionary. Let me talk about Eileen's arc, because I think she might be the character who grows the most quietly. Eileen starts as Margaret's nerdy friend who has an obvious crush on Rigby. That's her entire identity in her early appearances. She's smart, she wears glasses, she's awkward around Rigby. It would be easy for the show to leave her there, as a one-note supporting character whose only purpose is to make Rigby uncomfortable. But Eileen evolves. She becomes more confident. She pursues her own interests. She graduates from college on the same day Rigby graduates from high school, and the parallel there is meaningful. She was always ahead of him. She was always more accomplished, more driven, more capable. And Rigby, slowly, painfully, over the course of multiple seasons, starts to see that. He stops being annoyed by her and starts being impressed by her. And eventually, he falls for her. Not because the show needed to pair them off, but because the characters genuinely grew toward each other over years of shared screen time. In the series finale epilogue, Rigby and Eileen are married with kids. And Minty Lewis, the storyboard artist who voiced Eileen, was there from the beginning. She started as crew and became a character. Her voice became part of the show's identity. That's the kind of organic creative process that you can't manufacture. It happens because the right people are in the right room at the right time, and someone has the instinct to say, you should voice this character. Here's something else that I find endlessly fascinating about this show: the way it handles nostalgia. Regular Show is a deeply nostalgic show. The 80s references, the analog technology, the synth soundtracks, all of it creates a warm, retro atmosphere that feels like wrapping yourself in a blanket made of VHS tapes. But the show is also deeply suspicious of nostalgia. It repeatedly shows characters getting trapped by their attachment to the past. Benson can't move beyond his drumming career. Skips is defined by a loss from centuries ago. Mordecai can't get over Margaret, even when a better match is standing right in front of him. The show loves the 80s, but it also knows that living in the past is dangerous. And I think that tension is what makes the show so interesting. It celebrates the past while warning you not to get stuck there. It says, these old things are beautiful and meaningful, but your life is happening now. Don't miss it because you're looking backward. That's an incredibly mature message for a show that features a talking gumball machine screaming at a blue jay. And it's delivered so subtly that most viewers absorb it without even realizing they're being taught something. There's a whole episode about a literal format war between VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, and streaming. I mentioned this earlier, but I want to come back to it because I think it captures the show's relationship with technology better than anything else. In this episode, each format is personified as a warrior fighting for dominance. And the joke is that they're all fighting over which one is the best, when the truth is that they're all just ways of watching the same thing. The content doesn't change just because the format does. What matters is the experience, not the delivery mechanism. I think about that a lot in 2026. We're drowning in streaming platforms. Content is everywhere. And sometimes I genuinely miss the simplicity of walking into a video store and picking a VHS tape based on its cover art. Regular Show understood that feeling. It didn't romanticize it. It didn't pretend the past was better, but it acknowledged that something was lost in the transition to digital convenience. And I think a lot of viewers felt seen by that acknowledgement. And that brings me to something else I want to explore in more depth, which is the Diary episode from Season 3. Diary aired on July 23rd, 2012, and it's about Mordecai and Rigby accidentally breaking the lock on Margaret's diary while watering her plants. They don't read it, or at least they try not to, but they need to fix it before Margaret comes back. So they go to Skips for help, and he knows a magical ritual that can create an exact replica of the diary. The catch is, they have to close their eyes during the entire process, so they don't see any of Margaret's secrets. Here's the detail from this episode that blows my mind. During the ritual, it's revealed that the reason Skips always skips is because he vowed to skip for the rest of his life to stay close to the woman he loved. Now, this was before Skip's story in Season 5, which gave us the full Mona backstory, but the seed was planted here in a throwaway detail during a magical ritual in an episode about a diary. The show was building toward Skip's story 2 seasons in advance, and it did it so casually that most viewers didn't even register it as foreshadowing. They just accepted it as a quirky character detail and moved on. But Quintel knew. He already had the story in his head. He was just waiting for the right moment to tell it. This is something Regular Show does better than almost any other animated comedy. It plants seeds years before they bloom. Thomas is introduced as a boring intern in Season 4 and revealed as a spy in Season 6. The baby ducks appear as a one-off gag in Season 2 and return as warriors. Muscleman's "My Mom" jokes are annoying in Season 1 and heartbreaking by Season 3, after we learn about his father's death. The show rewards patience. It rewards the viewers who stick around and pay attention. And it does this without ever being opaque or inaccessible. You can enjoy any individual episode on its own terms, but the experience gets deeper the more you watch. I also want to talk about Gary's Synthesizer, which is Season 7, Episode 25. This is one of the wildest episodes in the entire series, and it's a perfect example of the show's commitment to using music as narrative. Mordecai and Rigby accidentally unplug cables from an old synthesizer, and they have to travel to the planet Synthos with skips to reconnect them and bring Gary back to life. Gary is one of the show's recurring characters, a wise, mellow figure who shows up whenever something cosmic is happening. And on Synthos, we learn that Gary has a half-brother named David, who has taken over as the planet's tyrannical ruler. The climax of the episode is a synthesizer duel between Gary and David for the throne of Synthos. David projects a holographic keyboard and plays a harmonious melody. Gary summons his synthesizer and responds with his own tune. The battle escalates, with both players levitating off the ground, their music becoming more complex and intense. And then Gary does something impossible. He plays harmony through Discord. David is stunned. He says it shouldn't be possible, and Gary responds with what might be the most Regular Show line ever written: "Nothing's impossible through music." That line is played completely straight. There's no wink, no irony, no comedic undercut. The show means it. Music is power. Music is how you fight. Music is how you heal. Music is how you remember. And on Synthos, music is literally how you govern. It's the show's musical philosophy stated explicitly. And it comes in an episode where two synthesizer players fight for a planet's future using keyboard solos. I love everything about this. Gary wins. David gets launched into the sun. And then Gary immediately gives up the throne, telling the citizens of Synthos that they don't need a ruler, and that music should be their guide. He gives up power because he'd rather travel the galaxy. And isn't that the most Regular Show resolution possible? The guy who just won everything chooses freedom over authority. He chooses the journey over the destination. Just like Mordecai and Rigby, who have cosmic adventures handed to them every episode, but would rather just hang out and play video games. Alright, let me get into some more deep-cut facts. The original concept for Regular Show wasn't even called Regular Show. It was called Normal Show, and the premise was completely different. It was about animals who take care of humans on display in a zoo. That's essentially the opposite of the final product. Instead of humans and animals coexisting in a mundane workplace, it was animals and humans in a zoo setting. Quintel evolved the concept significantly before pitching it to Cartoon Network, but the name change from normal to regular tells you something about his creative process. He was looking for a word that meant ordinary, but didn't sound ordinary. Regular has a flatness to it, an almost ironic quality when applied to a show where nothing is regular. It's a title that subverts its own meaning. Here's a detail about the animation that I think is really cool. The show's backgrounds were created using a combination of hand-painted and digital techniques that gave them a slightly muted, watercolor quality. This was intentional. The backgrounds are meant to feel lived in, slightly faded, like an old photograph. They contrast with the character designs, which are bold and simple. And that contrast creates this unique visual identity where the characters pop against a world that feels worn and real. It's subtle, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. The show's use of music deserves its own discussion. Quintel didn't just slap 80s songs onto scenes for nostalgia points. The music was carefully chosen to match the emotional register of each scene. When "Don't You Forget About Me" plays, it's never just a reference to The Breakfast Club. It's a statement about the scene's emotional stakes. When "Mississippi Queen" kicks in, it's not just period-appropriate rock music. It's a signal that the energy is escalating. The show treats its soundtrack like a character, using music to communicate things the dialogue doesn't say. And the original score composed by Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo for the early seasons, added another layer of musical identity. Mothersbaugh brought a new wave sensibility to the show's incidental music that perfectly complemented the 80s aesthetic. The score is quirky and electronic, and slightly off-kilter, which mirrors the show's tone exactly. Let me get into the fan community for a second, because I think the way fans engaged with this show tells you something about its impact. Regular Show inspired an incredibly active fan community that produced theories, art, analysis, and deep dives into the show's lore for years. And one of the most persistent fan discussions was about the show's connection to J.G. Quintel's post-Regular Show project, Close Enough. Close Enough premiered on HBO Max in 2020 and followed a couple in their 30s dealing with adulthood, parenting, and responsibilities. It used the exact same escalation formula as Regular Show, with mundane situations spiraling into absurd supernatural crises. Fans immediately noticed the connection and theorized that Close Enough was basically Regular Show for adults, which, honestly, isn't far from the truth. Quintel took the storytelling framework he'd perfected over 8 seasons of Regular Show and aged it up along with his audience. The kids who watched Regular Show in 2010 were adults by 2020, and Close Enough was made for them. And now, in 2026, we're getting Regular Show, The Lost Tapes. But I'll get to that. First, I want to talk about some specific episode details that I think reveal the show's craftsmanship in ways that casual viewers might miss. The Season 3 premiere, Stick Hockey, airing on September 19th, 2011, is 11 minutes long, but contains enough character backstory for a feature film. The episode introduces Benson's stick hockey past, his identity as Death Dragon, his apprentice Dave, Dave's death at the hands of Chong, and Benson's subsequent retirement from the game. That's a complete character arc compressed into less time than most YouTube videos about Regular Show. The efficiency of the storytelling is staggering. Not a single line is wasted. Every scene serves either the plot or the characterization, usually both. And by the end of the episode, your entire understanding of Benson has changed. You knew him as the angry boss. Now you know him as a man running from his past. Elo Governor is another example of this efficiency. The Season 2 premiere introduces Rigby's fear of horror movies, establishes that Mordecai is the braver of the two, and uses a possessed British taxi, a parody of Christine, to create genuine tension in an 11-minute runtime. The fact that this show could make you laugh and make your skin crawl in the same episode is remarkable, and it did it consistently. The tone of Regular Show shifts constantly, sometimes within the same scene, and it never feels jarring because the show earned the audience's trust. You believe it can be funny, and scary, and sad, and profound all at once, because it's proven it can be all those things. I keep thinking about something Quintel said about the show's voice acting philosophy. He wanted the characters to not talk loudly. He wanted them to sound conversational and natural. That seems like a small thing, but it's actually a radical choice for a Cartoon Network show. Most animated comedies are loud. The characters shout, scream, exclaim. The voice performances are cranked to 11, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Regular Show went the other direction. The characters talk like real people. They mumble, they trail off, they say and like. They interrupt each other. And that naturalism is what makes the emotional moments land so hard. When Mordecai quietly says something heartfelt, it hits different, because he's been talking at a normal human volume for the entire episode. There's no performance. There's no vocal fireworks, just a person saying something real. That's what makes this show's production so special. Every decision, from the muted backgrounds, to the conversational voice acting, to the carefully chosen 80s soundtrack, serves a unified vision. Quintel knew exactly what he wanted Regular Show to feel like, and every element of the production was calibrated to achieve that feeling. It's warm. It's real. It's the audio-visual equivalent of sitting with a friend at 2 a.m. and talking about the shows that shaped you. There's one more thing about the production that I want to mention, because it shows how much thought went into every aspect of this show. The show's approach to sound design was meticulous. Saber Media Studios in California handled all the music, sound effects, and final mixing, and they treated every episode like a short film. The sound design in Regular Show is deliberately layered. When an escalation happens, the audio changes, the music swells, the sound effects become more intense, the mixing shifts to emphasize the surreal over the mundane. And when the moment passes, everything drops back down to conversational. That dynamic range, that willingness to go from whisper to roar and back again within the same scene, is a massive part of why the show feels so alive. Most cartoons have a flat audio profile. Regular Show breathes. And you know what? Let me talk about something that most analysis of this show completely overlooks: the background characters. Regular Show has one of the richest collections of background and recurring characters in any animated series, and most of them are so quietly developed that you don't realize how much depth they have until you look at the full picture. Take Death, for example. Death is a recurring character who first appears in Over the Top, when Skips has to arm wrestle him to get Rigby's soul back. Death in Regular Show isn't some abstract cosmic force. He's a regular guy. He has hobbies. He has a wife, whose name is also Death. He plays in a band. He shows up at the park sometimes. And the show treats mortality as something you can negotiate with. Something with a personality and preferences and quirks. Death isn't scary in Regular Show. He's just another person with a job to do. And that casual normalization of mortality is one of the most quietly subversive things the show does. It says, death is part of life. It's not the enemy. It's the neighbor who shows up occasionally and has really specific opinions about arm wrestling. Then there's the god of basketball, Tecmo, the guardians of eternal youth, the baby ducks who become adult ducks who become a mech warrior duck formation. Every single one of these characters could have been a one-off joke that the show forgot about. But Regular Show remembered them all. It brought them back. It gave them arcs. And by the finale, when all of these characters show up to fight alongside the park crew, it feels like a family reunion rather than a forced cameo parade. These aren't callbacks for the sake of callbacks. These are characters the audience has a relationship with, even if that relationship was built across dozens of disconnected episodes. I think this approach to world building, where depth accumulates through breadth rather than through explicit exposition, is one of the most distinctive things about Regular Show. The show never sits you down and explains its mythology. It never has a lore dump episode. It never uses title cards to establish timeline or geography. It just tells stories. And through those stories, a world emerges. A rich, complicated, internally consistent world where Yetis are immortal, gumball machines manage parks, ghosts have shadows, and the key to defeating evil is a hug and a star. Let me talk about the show's approach to continuity, because I think it found a perfect balance that most shows struggle with. Regular Show is episodic. You can watch almost any episode in isolation and enjoy it, but it also rewards viewers who watch in order. Character relationships evolve, callbacks accumulate, throwaway details become significant in later episodes. The baby ducks start as a gag and become allies. Thomas starts as an intern and becomes a spy. Muscle Man starts as a jerk and becomes a father. The show never forces you to remember everything. If you miss an episode, you can still follow the next one. But if you do remember, if you catch the callback, if you notice the character growth, the experience is richer. That's a really hard balance to strike. Serialized shows demand commitment. Episodic shows lack depth. Regular Show threaded the needle between them, and it did it so well that you barely noticed the thread. And that brings me to one more obscure production detail that I want to share. The show's storyboard process was more collaborative than most animated series. Quintel encouraged his storyboard artists to add their own jokes, their own character moments, their own takes on scenes. He gave them room to play. And you can feel that in the show's energy. There's a looseness to Regular Show that comes from multiple creative voices contributing to each episode, not just executing a showrunner's vision, but adding to it. Minty Lewis getting cast as Eileen because of how she delivered a line in a pitch meeting is a perfect example. The show was built on moments like that, on people bringing their whole selves to the work, and the work being better for it. And there's something else about the storyboard process that I want to share, because I think it illuminates why Regular Show's comedy feels so different from other animated shows. Most animated comedies write scripts first and then have artists storyboard those scripts. Regular Show did it differently. Many episodes used a storyboard-driven approach, where the storyboard artists would develop the story visually as they went, often adding jokes and character moments that weren't in the original outline. This meant the comedy was visual and physical from its conception, not just verbal. When Mordecai and Rigby do something funny, it's funny because of how it looks and moves, not just because of the dialogue. The physical comedy in Regular Show, the way characters react with their whole bodies, the way escalation is conveyed through increasingly insane visual compositions, that comes from having artists think about comedy as movement and space, not just words on a page. This storyboard-driven approach also explains why the show's pacing feels so distinct. Each episode has its own rhythm, because each storyboard team brought their own sense of timing. Some episodes are fast and frantic. Others are slow and contemplative. The show never settles into a predictable groove because different artists with different sensibilities are shaping each episode's visual rhythm. And that variety is a strength, not a weakness. It means that even within a single season, you can get episodes that feel completely different from each other while still being unmistakably Regular Show. I also want to mention something about the show's influence on the animation industry, because I don't think it gets enough credit for what it changed. Before Regular Show and Adventure Time arrived on Cartoon Network in 2010, the network's programming was dominated by shows that skewed younger and played things safer. There was nothing wrong with those shows, but they existed within pretty narrow creative boundaries. Regular Show proved that you could make a show aimed at a young audience that featured adult themes, complex character development, genuine emotional weight, and a narrative sophistication that rewarded long-term viewing. And it did it while being genuinely funny. It didn't sacrifice comedy for depth or depth for comedy. It found both simultaneously. After Regular Show's success, you can see its DNA in dozens of shows that came after it. Steven Universe's emotional honesty, Gumball's metatextual playfulness, Craig of the Creek's celebration of everyday adventures. Even shows outside the Cartoon Network ecosystem, like Gravity Falls on Disney Channel, share Regular Show's commitment to building mythology out of episodic adventures. Quintel and his team didn't just make a great show. They expanded what was possible for animated television aimed at younger audiences. They proved the audience was smarter and more emotionally sophisticated than the industry assumed. And in doing so, they changed the medium. I want to take a moment here to talk about something that this show did better than almost any other animated series I can think of, which is depicting male friendship. Mordecai and Rigby's relationship is the beating heart of Regular Show, and it is, I believe, one of the most honest depictions of male friendship in the history of animation. They love each other. They'd die for each other. They have died for each other, literally, multiple times. But they also compete with each other, betray each other, lie to each other, and resent each other. They're jealous and petty and supportive and loyal, often in the same episode. Mordecai is smarter and more capable, and he knows it, and sometimes he's condescending about it. Rigby is lazier and less accomplished, and he knows it, and sometimes he's defensive about it. They push each other's buttons because they know exactly where those buttons are. They've been friends long enough to weaponize their intimacy, and the show never simplifies this. It never says friendship is easy, or friends don't fight. It says friendship is work. Real friendship requires confronting uncomfortable truths about yourself and the people you love. Real friendship means sticking around after the fight, after the betrayal, after the moment where you genuinely wonder if this person is worth the trouble. And the answer, in Regular Show, is always yes. Mordecai and Rigby make each other worse in 100 small ways, but they make each other better in the ways that count. There's a scene in the finale, 25 years later, where Mordecai and Rigby see each other at the park reunion. They're middle-aged, they have families, they've lived entire lives apart, and there's this moment where they just look at each other, and everything they've been through together, every fight, every adventure, every near-death experience, every escalation, it's all there in that look. They don't need to say anything. The audience feels the weight of 8 seasons and over 260 episodes and years of shared history condensed into a single moment of eye contact between two old friends. I need you to think about what it takes to earn a moment like that. You can't fake it. You can't shortcut it. You have to build it episode by episode, scene by scene, joke by joke, fight by fight, reconciliation by reconciliation. That's what Regular Show did. It spent 8 years building toward a single look between two characters, and when it finally came, it was worth every minute. I think about the people I've grown apart from when I watch that scene. Friends from college, friends from my 20s, people I was inseparable from once, and now only see on social media. And I think Quintel intended that. Not specifically, maybe, but he understood that a story about two friends who grow up together would resonate with anyone who's ever watched a friendship change. And change doesn't mean end. Mordecai and Rigby still love each other at that reunion, but they're different people now. They have different lives, and the friendship that once defined everything about their identity has become one thread among many. That's growing up. That's what it actually feels like. Here's another thing I want to explore before we wrap up, and it's something that I've been thinking about obsessively while researching this video. The show's complete series, DVD, was released on February 4th, 2025. All 8 seasons. All of them. In a physical format. On DVD in 2025, when most shows are exclusively streaming and physical media is supposedly dead. I think Regular Show would appreciate that irony. A show that uses VHS tapes as plot devices and treats analog technology with reverence, getting a physical media release years after the streaming revolution. It feels intentional, even if it wasn't. It feels like the show's worldview manifesting in its own distribution. And here's another obscure detail. The series finale, a regular epic final battle, aired once and only once on Cartoon Network. It didn't rerun. For years, the only way to watch the final episode was on streaming or through recordings. It wasn't until April 5th, 2024, that the finale finally aired again on Cartoon Network as part of its standard rerun rotation. That's over 7 years between airings. 7 years where the show's conclusion existed in a kind of limbo, seen by its original audience, but invisible to anyone who came to the show later. I don't know if that was a deliberate choice by the network or just scheduling logistics, but it creates this strange mythology around the finale. It was rare. It was precious. If you saw it live, you were part of something that wouldn't happen again for nearly a decade. Let me also talk about Bet to Be Blonde from Season 3, because it illustrates something about the show's ability to take ridiculous premises and find real emotion in them. The episode aired on September 26th, 2011. Mordecai loses a video game bet to Rigby, who cheated, and has to dye his hair blonde for a week. When Mordecai gets the blonde hair, a group of blonde men immediately recruit him into their cult. And here's the thing, Mordecai goes along with it. He lets himself be absorbed into this group. He starts acting differently. He starts pulling away from Rigby, and Rigby, who caused all of this by cheating, has to watch his best friend become someone else. On the surface, it's absurd, a hair color cult, but underneath, it's about how identity is fragile, how easily we can be absorbed into groups that change who we are, how cheating, even small cheating, has consequences that ripple outward in unexpected ways. Rigby cheated at a video game, and the result was almost losing his best friend to a blonde-haired underground society. That's the escalation formula at its most thematically precise. The supernatural consequence mirrors the emotional truth. Cheating creates distance. Distance creates alienation. Alienation, if left unchecked, becomes permanent. The episode ends with Mordecai revealing he was just pranking Rigby back for cheating, but then the blonde men turn hostile and chase them both. They barely escape when the underground lair explodes. Even the resolution of the prank has consequences. Even the attempt to make things even creates more chaos. There's no clean reset in Regular Show. Every action leaves a mark, even if that mark is a crater where a blonde cult used to be. And speaking of consequences and actions, there's one more episode detail I want to share before we head toward the end of this video, because I think it perfectly captures the show's ability to find profundity in absurdity. In the first season, there's an episode where Mordecai and Rigby get into trouble for not setting up chairs for an event. Chairs. That's the entire premise. They need to set up folding chairs, and they don't want to do it. and everything spirals from there. And I think about that episode a lot because it encapsulates the show's central argument in its purest form. The task is so small, so insignificant. Setting up chairs is maybe the most boring job a person can do. But in Regular Show's universe, refusing to do that job has real, tangible, potentially catastrophic consequences. The show is saying something about dignity of labor, about how no task is beneath you, about how the things you dismiss as insignificant are actually the foundation of everything else in your life. If you can't be trusted to set up chairs, how can you be trusted with anything bigger? And there's something else about the chair episode, and episodes like it, that I want to highlight. The park is a public space. It's a place where people go to relax, to play, to have events. When Mordecai and Rigby fail at their jobs, they're not just disappointing Benson. They're failing the community. The park serves the public. Their negligence has consequences that extend beyond their own lives. And I think the show is quietly teaching its audience that your work matters to people you'll never meet. That responsibility isn't just about avoiding punishment. It's about contributing to something larger than yourself. For a show about two slackers who would rather play video games than do their jobs, that's a remarkably civic-minded message. This connects to why Benson is so angry all the time. He's not just a boss. He's a public servant. He manages a space that belongs to the community. And when his employees don't do their jobs, the community suffers. His anger isn't petty. It's righteous. He cares about the park because the park matters to people. And Mordecai and Rigby's gradual understanding of that, their slow realization that their work serves a purpose beyond their own comfort, is one of the show's quietest and most important arcs. If you're still here, and I hope you are, let me share one more thought before we move toward the end. I think Regular Show is fundamentally a show about the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Every character exists in that gap. Mordecai wants to be an artist, but works as a groundskeeper. Rigby wants to be respected, but hasn't earned it. Benson wants to be valued, but is constantly undermined. Skips wants to be at peace, but is haunted by loss. Muscleman wants to be taken seriously, but hides behind jokes. Pops wants to understand the world, but the world is too complicated for him. They're all reaching for something they don't have yet. And the show's journey is about whether they'll close that gap or learn to live with it. The answer, as it turns out, is both. Some of them close it. Rigby gets his diploma. Mordecai becomes an artist. Muscleman becomes a father. Others learn to live with it. Skips will always carry Mona's memory. Benson will always be a little angry. And Pops closes his gap in the most absolute way possible, by transcending it entirely, by becoming something beyond what anyone expected, including himself. I know I keep coming back to this point, but I think it's the key to everything about this show. Regular Show understood that actions have weight, that nothing is truly consequence-free, that even in a cartoon, even in 11 minutes, even in a story about a hair color bet, you can say something true about how human beings treat each other. And it said those things every single week, for 8 years, without ever once feeling preachy or didactic. It just told stories, and the stories did the work. Okay, let me bring this home with what I think is the most exciting Regular Show news in years. Regular Show. The Lost Tapes is premiering on May 11th, 2026 on Cartoon Network. Announced at the Annecy Animation Film Festival in 2024. Confirmed by Warner Brothers. Discovery. In June of that year, this is a genuine revival, with Quintel returning as showrunner. The new season will run for 44 episodes. The voice cast includes Quintel, William Salyers, Sam Marin, Mark Hamill, Minty Lewis, and Janie Haddad Tompkins. Executive producers are Quintel, Sean Sealis, and Sam Register. Toby Jones is the supervising director, and the series will eventually be available for streaming on Hulu and HBO Max. I can't overstate how significant this is. Regular Show ended in 2017. That's 9 years ago. 9 years where the show existed only as a finished product. A complete story with a definitive ending. Pops died. The characters grew up. The 25-year time skip showed us where everyone ended up. It was done. It was complete. And now it's coming back. And I have mixed feelings about that, honestly. I love Regular Show. I've spent weeks of my life watching and rewatching and analyzing it. But the original series had one of the best endings in animation history. It was perfect. It said everything it needed to say. And part of me worries that continuing the story will diminish what came before. But then I think about Quintel. This is his baby. He created these characters from scratch in his dorm room at CalArts. He voiced Mordecai for 8 years. He built a world and a mythology and a cast of characters that millions of people fell in love with. If anyone knows whether there's more story to tell, it's him. And the fact that he's coming back, that he's not just producing or consulting, but actively running the show, tells me he believes there's something worth saying that he didn't get to say the first time around. The title, The Lost Tapes, suggests we're going back in time rather than forward. This might be a prequel of sorts, filling in gaps from the original timeline rather than extending beyond the finale. And if that's the case, I'm much more optimistic. There are years of untold stories in the regular show universe. What was Benson doing before he became park manager? What was Skip's life like in the centuries between Mona's death and the events of the show? What happened during the 3 years the park crew was in space? Those are stories worth telling. And Quintel is the right person to tell them. At the Emerald City Comic Con 2026 panel, regular show, Behind the Madness, cast members discussed the revival. And the energy was palpable. These people love this show. They love these characters. They love the fans who kept the fandom alive for 9 years. And they're excited to be back. And there's something else about the revival announcement that gives me hope. The complete series DVD release in February 2025 proved that there's still a massive audience for this show. People bought physical copies of a series that ended 8 years ago. That doesn't happen for shows that have been forgotten. Regular show's fandom didn't shrink after the show ended. It grew. New viewers discovered it on streaming. Old viewers rewatched it with adult eyes and found new layers. The show aged like good wine. Jokes that were funny at 12 hit differently at 25. Character arcs that seemed simple in childhood reveal their complexity in adulthood. And I think that's the strongest argument for The Lost Tapes. The audience is ready for more. Not because they need more content, but because they understand this show in ways they couldn't when it first aired. I also think the 44 episode order is significant. That's a substantial commitment from Cartoon Network. They're not testing the waters with a limited run or a one-off special. They're giving Quintel room to tell a full story. That tells you how confident the network is in the property. And with the original voice cast returning, Quintel, Salyers, Marin, Hamill, Lewis, Haddad Tompkins, this isn't a cash grab reboot with new actors doing impressions. This is the real thing. These are the people who made regular show what it was, coming back to do it again. And if the chemistry that made the original series work is still intact, and I believe it is because you can't fake that kind of creative partnership, The Lost Tapes could be something truly special. I'm excited too. I'm cautiously, nervously, overwhelmingly excited. Because regular show was never regular. It was always something extraordinary, disguised as something ordinary. And if The Lost Tapes captures even a fraction of what made the original series special, we're in for something incredible. And that, I think, is the best way to end this. Regular show is a show about ordinary people dealing with extraordinary circumstances. It's about growing up, losing things, finding new things, making mistakes, learning from them, and occasionally, accidentally sending your coworker to the moon. It's about the fact that every mundane task in your life has the potential to spiral into something magical if you're brave enough or stupid enough to let it. Regular show ran for 8 seasons, over 260 episodes, 1 feature film, 6 Halloween specials, and countless moments that changed how a generation of viewers thought about growing up, friendship, loss, and what it means to be ordinary in an extraordinary world. It won an Emmy for an episode about eggs. It made us cry over a lollipop man. It turned a gumball machine into one of the most sympathetic characters in animation. It gave an immortal Yeti a love story that haunts me to this day. The show taught a generation of kids that their boring lives were secretly extraordinary, that their friendships mattered, that their choices had consequences, that the 80s were cool. That growing up is terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, and that sometimes The sweetest person in the room is the one who saves the entire universe. Pops is gone, but the show lives on. The story continues. And in less than a month, Mordecai and Rigby are coming back. And if that's not the most regular show way to end things, I don't know what is. A story that ended perfectly, coming back because there's more to say. A creator who walked away, coming back because the characters called him home. An audience that moved on, coming back because the park was always there, waiting. Nothing is ever truly over. The universe resets. The tape rewinds. And somewhere, on a television in an afterlife that looks like a living room, Pops is watching. He was always watching, and he's smiling because he knows what we're only starting to understand. That the show was never regular. The show was always extraordinary. We just had to grow up enough to see it. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. I mean that. These long-form videos take weeks to research and write, and the fact that you stayed for all of it means more than I can say. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it. It's the best way to make sure you don't miss the next one. And if you can't sleep, well, that's what the next video is for. Jolly good show.